And Sean said that Troy Yearwood has star power. And I'm not sold yet. Another episode of WWE Legends and Future Greats aired. And we got to see more of the format, just to see how this show works. Last week I kind of complained about the format, and I'm still having some issues with it. Like, starting with a live match, even though that had nothing to do with the rest of the show, was a bit much. But I kind of understood it too. We got to see the people that stood out last week fight again. This time it was an intergender match. Tyra and Anthony Luke versus Shiloh and Danny. And I thought that was an entertaining intergender match. I still think the best match, even the matches we'll be going over tonight, the best match was last week between Tyra and Danny. They definitely had the best match. But another big thing happened in this episode. We got to see the full teams. And I still say if they ever do this again, I hope the coaches get to pick their own teams. It's not some random will, which just makes me think it's all a work because it's pro wrestling. And anytime there's just a random thing where you pick out names, do I think it's real? Not necessarily, especially after Braden BJ Ray ends up on Team Bubba Ray Dudley, the person he had some issues with in episode 1. Yeah, like I said last week, I thought that maybe this was a bit of a work between Bubba Ray and BJ Ray having some issues with one another. The coach and the student having issues. It's a classic story, really. But it does add a layer to the show. I'm not complaining about it. If it is production interference, I'm not complaining about it. You know, it does give us a storyline for the actual show. Bubba Ray ends up with BJ Ray on his team, Tatyanna Dumas, Drake Moreau, and Zina Sterling, or Zena Sterling, however you pronounce her name. I think Bubba's team has, like, as a collective, the biggest personalities as a team. Not so much Drake Moreau, but Zena, Tatyanna, BJ Ray, I think they all have personalities that stand out that we saw a lot in this episode. I feel like Bubba Ray's team got the most screen time overall because they're giving us storylines, and Bubba himself is giving us storylines with the whole issues with him and BJ Ray. We also got to see Tatyanna get in her head at the beginning. She was making a lot of mistakes in the ring with Bubba Ray, trying to teach her. She broke down and cried about it. And then she got redemption later in the episode, which we'll talk about. We got to see Zena and her wacky personality. Bubba Ray saying that he wants her to just be herself, keep that personality because that's who she is. Turn it up a little. And, you know, that usually does make the best wrestling characters. So I came out of this episode liking Zena a lot. And then, of course, when the coaches had to pick who was going to get the first matches, BJ Ray wanted to be one of the first matches for his team. So Bubba had the team, you know, kind of dual promos with each other. BJ thought he had the best. It was entertaining. It made me chuckle, I guess. Drake completely botched his promo. Like, he stopped doing it in the middle of it, which I thought was pretty lame. So BJ said the rest of the team didn't cut good promos. Zena's was okay. I thought Tatyanna's was good, though. I thought Tatyanna's relatable, and I think that's something that she has going for her after this episode. Before we get to the matches, though, let's break down some of these other teams. On Team Mickie James is Chris Island, which, by the way, last week I was shitting on some of these people's names because I thought these were names that NXT gave to them. But turns out that Chris Island, that's his real name. And Leigh Laurel, that's her real name. You know, those are the two names I shit on. So sorry for shitting on the real names, but I thought it was... I still think they're good wrestling names, for the record. I don't think they're good wrestling names. I just thought NXT gave them these names, you know, like Ricky Saints, for instance. don't love it. But anyway, on Mickie's James team is Chris Island, Troy Yearwood, Danny, who we saw last week, and Serena Linton, who I barely remember. The standouts from Mickie James' team, definitely Danny, who we saw last week, and Troy Yearwood after this episode. We saw nothing of Serena in this episode. Chris Island did have a match, which we'll talk about. On Team Booker is Anthony Luke, Panina, whose last name I can't pronounce, Jasper Troy, and Leigh Laurel. Booker was talking a lot of crap. He was talking his crap in this episode. But his team ended up walking the walk, too. I think we saw Anthony Luke last week. He chose Booker's team, and I think Anthony Luke showed a lot of promise. Panina has a great personality. She's a natural heel. Leigh Laurel stood out in her match. You know, she has a great look, as we've talked about. And then Jasper Troy, I thought he had one of the best performances of the night, which we'll talk about when we get to the matches. But if you look at Booker's team, as far as the editing of the show goes, his whole team has gotten some screen time, and you can't say that for literally any other team. Because we haven't seen nothing of Serena on Team Mickie. We've barely seen Drake on Team Bubba. And on Team Undertaker is Bailey Humphrey. Who is that? She's gotten like less than a minute of screen time in 2 episodes. But Undertaker's team also has Shiloh Hill, Tyra May Steele, who chose his team last week when she won the first standout. And Evander Holyfield's son, Elijah Holyfield, is on Taker's team as well. I think it's a solid team outside of Bailey Humphrey, who we don't know. But, yeah. Let's get to the matches. The first matchup was Xena Sterling versus Panina, where Panina played the heel, Xena was the face. The story was supposed to be Panina playing the dominant heel. Xena was the underdog babyface who seemed a little scared of Panina coming into the match. I thought Xena was giving her personality like Bubba wanted her to do when she came out to the ring into the match. Before the match started, I thought she was doing a good job. And like I said earlier, Panina is a natural heel. The match I thought was pretty decent. It told a good enough story. Xena ends up winning with the surprise roll-up. Taker and Mickie James thought that Panina wasn't intense enough as the dominant heel. I guess there were some moves that she didn't lay into good enough, and I can agree with that. She said she's afraid of her own strength and she doesn't want to hurt anybody, and I think that's just something she's going to have to get used to. But I thought this match didn't get enough love from the coaches, actually. I thought they both did what they needed to do. Sure, maybe Panina didn't lay into the moves hard enough to make it look hurtful enough at certain points, but there were other points of the match she did. And Xena was her character throughout, and her personality came across, so I liked it. The next match was Jasper Troy, who's on Booker T's team, against Chris Island, who's on Mickie James' team. Jasper played the heel. Chris was the baby face. They gave Chris instructions to show fire in the match. Jasper is who stood out in this match, though. Let's be real. And I know at the end of the match, Chris said that Jasper wasn't leading the match, but Jasper has more ring time in this match than Chris does. And yeah, Chris has this amateur wrestling background, but I thought Jasper Troy really stood out. He was the dominant heel that he was supposed to be. And what made the match kind of falter was Chris Island's comeback. Before I even heard the coaches, I was like, wow, this comeback really feels rushed. And it was kind of out of nowhere that after Jasper's dominating the match, Chris is coming back so quick to win it. So I was, I liked when Booker called that out, that the comeback was rushed. I think more than just Booker called it out. The coaches in general called it out. But yeah, Jasper stood out, and to me, he was the biggest standout of the men. Now, Troy Yearwood got a lot of praise, and it was Troy Yearwood versus Shiloh Hill. And before the match, when they called the matchup, Shiloh and Troy got on each other's faces and had a little shoving match. And Undertaker told Shiloh to show more aggression, be this aggressive heel, and he showed that during that pre-match face-to-face thing. And then Shiloh came out again, intense during his entrance to start the match. But similar to last week when we saw Shiloh before, during the match, his intensity kind of fades away. And I don't know why that is, but it's definitely a problem I see. It's kind of the opposite of Troy Yearwood, actually. Shiloh shows his character well. He cut good promos last week. He has this intensity before the match begins. And then the match starts, and he's very forgettable. Troy's the opposite. Troy, during this match, he got a lot of praise from the coaches for his athleticism. He was selling great moves. He had a great arm drag. He took a great face bump. I agree with all those points. Last week, though, we saw his promo, and it was a struggle. And he's been in the Performance Center a year or more, and he hasn't been able to get better at promos yet. I do think that is a problem. The other problem I have is that, when the coaches voted, it was a tie between Jasper and Troy, which is hard to say because Jasper's name is Jasper Troy, but it was a tie between Troy Yearwood and Jasper Troy, 2 votes each. So Shawn Michaels had to break the tie. And Shawn said that Troy Yearwood has star power. And I'm not sold yet. I love Shawn, and I think Troy is great in the ring. Obviously, that is his strong point. Like the Ricky Steamboats that Mickie said that his arm drag looked like. But until I see more character, until I see more promo, to me, Jasper just stands out more as an actual future star. He has the look. He looked natural as a dominant heel in the ring. I guess you can say, yeah, Troy will be a good babyface, and maybe that's what they mean by star power. More of a star power as a babyface, but I still think Jasper has more potential star power as a heel. So I didn't necessarily agree, but it was close, and I'm not gonna sit here and go against one of the greatest of all time, and Shawn Michaels, obviously. The last match was Tatyanna versus Leigh Laurel. This was Tatyanna's first match ever. The storyline earlier in the episode was her getting in her own head, so Bubba had to get her out of her head. And Leigh has only been in the Performance Center for 5 months, so she had to kind of carry the match for Tatyanna's first match. What they did great was their stare down before the match that looked intense. The coaches bought it, / judges, whatever we're calling them, bought it. And then when they finally locked up, it did get a pop from the rest of the performers watching the match. And that is pro wrestling. You make people want to see something so basic because it means so much. And for this to be Tatyanna's first match, I thought I was impressed. Tatyanna stands out to me because I do think that she has it. Leigh Laurel has a great look. I think she probably has it too. I don't buy her character. I didn't buy her promo last week. But Tatyanna, Leigh has a presence, but it's because she looks good. Let's just be real. And I think that's what the coaches see too, to keep it real. Tatyanna had a presence too, her first match ever. I really do think she has it. And I look forward to seeing what she brings in the future. If this was her first match, I thought she did great. I thought the match was short. Maybe they kept it short because it was Tatyanna's first match. Because they kept it short, I was surprised that Leigh Laurel got almost a unanimous vote from the coaches to get a point. And I felt like they didn't give enough respect to Xena and Penina's match. I thought they could have been in the conversation too. I get that Tatyanna and Leigh stood out because of that first moment of the match. But I would have liked to have seen Xena and Penina get more respect from the coaches. But as it stands, they gave the point to Leigh, which means Booker T's team got a point. And with Troy getting a point, Mickie James' team got a point. So they now lead the standings, and Booker T is talking his smack. And he should, because his team, as far as the edit goes, is looking the best as a team. We'll see if the other teams can come together more as a team. We got the story between BJ and Bubba. BJ's looking to prove himself to Bubba, but he's still being this cocky shithead that Bubba doesn't like to see from him. I think it'll be interesting to see if BJ actually falls on his face, which is possible because we've yet to see him in a match. But he does got that personality. He does have star written on him as a natural heel as well. So, enjoying the show so far. You know, the format could use some tweaks, as I said last week, but so far so good.